Hello everybody, this is Fun Police and I'm bringing you a new Steel Division 2 deck tech. For today we're taking a look at the Unternehmen Rosselsprung, which is the new German division available with Raid of Dravar that came out just a few weeks ago. There's a lot of ways to kind of build this division, but I think that it's overall a pretty fun one, with the only caveat being that it's only going to work pretty much with Vanguard or Maverick. In terms of deployment types. The simple fact is, this division does not have the ability to go long into the game. The tools that it has there are some powerful aspects of it, and some okay ones in the other categories, but everything that makes a good division that can go long just is not here for the Unternehmen Rosselsprung. You have limited AT, your Air Force is at best mediocre, you have limited artillery, your anti-air is not impressive, you have almost no real tank force. So this division is very much for smaller games like 1v1s, 2v2s, and similar sizes. Anything bigger and you're really not going to be able to see any success with this. However, when in those small games, they have some excellent infantry and a decent enough set of units in order to win games. So let's just dive into it and talk about one of the biggest tabs of the division, and that is its recon tab. We have a lot of options here, but I've opted to load this out with a lot of the armored vehicles alongside some sniper infantry. So in Phase A, we have the Panzer IIF, the AB-41, and the AB-43 47mm. So the AB-41 is probably the most basic recon car. It's quite fast, it's thinly armored, but it's got a 20mm autocannon on it, meaning it's great at supporting infantry. You also have the Panzer IIF, which is slower and still has an autocannon, but it has better frontal armor, which means that it is able to be a little more resistant to autocannons itself, which will overall make it a little more durable. And then you have the AB-43, which is a unique vehicle. It's got the same armor as the AB-41, and it is in fact a little bit faster, but the biggest thing is it's got a 47mm gun on the top of it. This means that it's got a decent HE shell with a high rate of fire, meaning it's still good at infantry support, but it's also got an AP shell with 65mm of penetration, enough to reliably threaten other recons, transports, and lightly armored targets, and even the potential to kill a tank if it can get to the side and deal some damage. It's overall a pretty solid vehicle, and as you'll see as we go on, anything that can essentially penetrate armor is something we're going to really consider because we have so few options in terms of anti-armor. Moving into Phase B, we start off with the Fusilier Brandenburger Aufklärer. These are powerful 6-man sniper squads. They have a semi-automatic sniper rifle and 5 G43s. They come with Vet 2 only, so they have a very high rate of fire and amazing accuracy. So these guys are really, really powerful at just harassing enemy units. We also have a card of SS Gebrigtsjäger Fusiliers, which are essentially slightly weaker versions of the Brandenburgers. They only have a bolt-action sniper, but we do get an automatic rifle on them, and they have a decent amount of MP40s. So they're a little bit more of a durable squad and can act as more so of a line infantry if they need to, compared to the Brandenburgers, but they're not as powerful in terms of sniping. We do get 6 of them, though, so that is quite nice. And then the final thing in Phase B is that we also have another card of AB-41s. Another 12 autocannon recon cars is just nice to keep up the pressure with our infantry. Speaking of which, we move on to the infantry tab. So this infantry tab is robust and well-rounded, but maybe a bit smaller than you might see in other units. We still have 80 infantry to make use of, so we still have plenty, plus the couple Gebrig Fusiliers, so we even got a little bit of extra. But to start off, we have the SS Gebrigtsjäger. These are your most basic line infantry. They have 11 man, they have an automatic rifle, they have an AT grenade, and they most notably are 20 points and come with great availability, having 12, 24, 32. Very, very good Not the strongest squad in 1v1 combat, but you're able to get a lot of them out, and each card that has them brings a fair amount with you. Then we have the SS Fallschirmjäger. These are, the best way I can describe these is a mix between Panzer Grenadiers with the double machine guns and Pioneers with this explosive. They also are fanatical raiders, so they are never going to surrender and also have stealth bonuses. These guys are really good, and I've actually taken them vetted up to improve them even more. The biggest thing that these guys are is that they're very versatile. They can pretty much do anything. They can fight at range due to the double MG and bolt actions, or they can do good damage at close range with the several MP40s and that explosive. They're very versatile, and they're very, very strong. Then we have our leader for Phase A, which is the SS Jahrbrigtsjägerführer. This is a powerful leader squad, 12-man strength, so it's very, very durable. It's got a lot of bolt actions on it, but the biggest thing is that it's got its own scoped bolt action sniper rifle, and then it's also got an anti-tank rifle, which is good at sniping like transports and half-tracks and light vehicles. It's a very, very powerful leader squad that isn't going to go down easily and is just very versatile in what it can do. It's a great pairing with some of these infantry that don't have AT, so you can like blow up enemy like recon cars, or just offer them support through sniping. Then we have the final infantry of Phase A, the SS Jahrbrigtsjäger Pioneer. These guys are massive 15-man squads, and they compare very similar to the Jahrbrigtsjäger themselves, but they just are larger with way more bolt actions and these jerry can bombs. So the amount of rifles that they have gives them the ability to actually be a pretty solid ranged unit. Not the strongest out there, but they can definitely hold their own just by sheer weight of fire. And then the jerry can bombs gives them a potent close range option. So they're kind of like the Fallschirmjäger, where they're pretty versatile at both range and close quarters. I'd say they're maybe a little bit worse at range, but better at close range than the Fallschirmjäger, but they're both really good. It's overall a potent A phase that's backed up with some elite infantry, backed up by some weaker, spammable Jahrbrigtsjäger. Then in B phase, we have the SS Jahrbrigtsjäger Strife, which are essentially super forms of the standard SS Jahrbrigtsjäger. These guys have an MG34, are fully armed with G43s, the semi-automatics, and have multiple MP40s and a Panzerfaust. This means that they're pretty much just outright better than the standard Jahrbrigtsjäger. You don't get as many of them, only 12, but they do come in vetted, so they're going to be quite powerful infantry, notably better than the Jahrbrigtsjäger overall. So they're a very solid line infantry. And then we get probably the best infantry unit in the entire division, the Brandenburger. These guys are 12-man. They have double MG42s, 6 G43s, 4 MP40s, and the explosive bundle grenades. They're essentially super versions of the SS Fallschirmjäger because they also come in double vetted. That's the only way you can take them. You only get 8 of them per card in Phase B, so you don't get a whole lot of them, but they're easily the best infantry. Place them near a leader to get that third vet on them, and they will just pretty much win almost every fight. There's almost nothing that can beat them in 1v1 engagements due to just have them having pretty much all of the best equipment. Very, very powerful. And then the final card is in Phase C, where we get 32 Jahrbrigtsjäger. We're not taking them vetted because we just want to spam out a bunch of Jahrbrigtsjäger and hopefully close the game out as we go into C. This makes sure we don't run out if the game drags on, but we don't want to... we don't actually want to take too much in Phase C because we don't plan on winning. We want to win very quickly through Phase A and Phase B and only be in Phase C for as little time as possible. But we still need a card of infantry, and the Jahrbrigtsjäger give the largest amount. In terms of other infantry, there's not a whole lot I would honestly take. I think the biggest one would be the Brandenburger Pioneers, which are insane close quarters units. Double flamethrower, 6 MP40s, and vetted up. Very, very powerful. I just didn't have the room to fit them in. You could also take more Brandenburgers. I don't think it's ever a bad idea to take more of these guys. But most of the other units, like the Croatian units, are just sadly not good. The biggest downside to them is that their vet availability just isn't very good. As you see, like, we get 3 less of them than like the Jaeger. They don't have raiders, and they're overall smaller. The Cadetin also isn't worth taking. Even though they're 15 points, they don't have a machine gun, and I don't think they'll win close range engagements quickly enough for them to be worth taking. The Stossjäger is actually a good close range squad. I just didn't find room for it. But 20 points for 8 MP40s and a explosive, that's not bad. You could legitimately take them. But most of the other units are pretty skippable. Now we move on to tanks. Now, the tank tab is pretty straightforward. I think the one thing that is you're going to absolutely take is the Panzer 35S. You get 8 of them in Phase A, and they have a 47mm gun with 70mm of penetration and a HE rounds. Overall, really, really solid at infantry support, and they can also deal with light vehicles themselves. It's overall a fine little vehicle. Also, the M1542, which is a pretty potent vehicle that I prefer to bring in B phase to get 12 of them. It also has a 47mm gun, so it's the same thing as the Panzer 35S, but you get more of them. Again, really good for infantry support. As you'll notice, all of these vehicles are light vehicles, so we're just going to have a bajillion light vehicles supporting our infantry and overwhelming the enemy through just like a crazy amount of like supporting fire from these things. And then the final unit, which I'm taking, is the L640. They come in at Veterancy 1, so they actually have minor improvements to their autocannon, so they're a little bit better than, say, the standard AB1. They also have more armor, so they're a little more durable, but I just want more autocannons in Phase B, combined with our card of AB41s, and that's 24 vehicles we can spam out that have autocannons on them. Just a bajillion of them that can really just destroy enemy infantry and make sure that pretty much every squad we has its own autocannon with it to win fights guaranteed. Then we move on to the support tab. Actually, just a quick comment. This Panzer 35R I would not take. It's maybe a decent support gun, but you're getting up to 3 core slots, and that's quite expensive. And most notably, it's got a 37mm gun, which is much less effective in HE, and its AP round is absolute garbage. It can barely deal with like a half track in terms of penetration, so I would avoid taking these. I don't think they're worth it, really. Then onto the support tab, we're taking a card of SS Fallschirmjäger's MG42s. This is just the best machine gun that the division has because it's a MG42, but it's got Raiders and Fanatical on there. There's not a whole lot else to say. If you wanted more machine guns, you could take the Brandenburger MG42, which you can still have the standard curve with. The only other MG that I would honestly consider is the MG37, which has, you can get 6 of them in Phase A, which means you could have a lot more of them. But we have so many autocannons that I don't think we need like a lot of machine guns to spam out compared to just like a couple just to back our lineup. We also are taking a commander. The commander is really, really important, or just any commander really is, because we need to vet up not only our infantry but also some of our support things like anti-air and artillery, due to the fact that our various other tabs that are supporting are not very good, and we need this veterancy to make them as good as possible. Then we have the Kubel munitions. Not a whole lot to say. Standard supply vehicle. Whenever you can take the Kubel over the Opel Blitz supply, take it, because you just get twice the amount of units for the same. You get the same amount of supply, but you have twice the amount of units to work with, so it's just more flexible. There's literally no downside to taking the Kubel over the Opel Blitz. And then the final card is the LG42. The LG42 is an incredibly good support weapon. It's got a 2000 range HE shell with 105 millimeters. And then it's also got a heat shell at 1500 meters that can reliably kill medium tanks. It's a very, very potent infantry gun. I'm taking them in Phase B, so I get a monstrous 6 of them, but you could also take them very easily in Phase A, even though you only get 3 of them. I think it comes down a little bit to preference, but as I said, I really want to have as much AT as possible, and the LG42 fills that requirement, because so they can kind of act like an additional AT gun, but they're also just really good support units. The only other thing I would honestly consider taking outside of the MG37 are the 75mm IG-18s. These guys aren't fantastic, but they're cheap and they're not bad supporting units. Their HE round can do good jobs, especially if you can do something like catch infantry out in the open, like crossing a field. These guys will very quickly decimate them, so it can be a decent gun. I just didn't have the room for it. Then we move on to the AT tab, and we're using all the slots. So to start out, we have the PaK 36. The PaK 36 is essentially going to be a long-range Panzerschreck for what we're using it for. This heat round only has 750 meters of range, but has 180 millimeters of penetration, so it's able to punch through almost every tank and one-shot it, but it's got to be close, like a kind of like how you use a Panzerschreck. Its standard round can snipe half-tracks and transports, but the big thing is this heat round. We get 6 of them in Phase A, and we're essentially going to use this and pop it out of from behind a village or in a forest, and it uses its heat round, kills off an enemy tanks, and then pulls back to hide and ambush later on. The main AT gun of Phase A is going to be the PaK 38 50mm. The biggest thing that the PaK 50 has is that it's pretty much the only reliable Phase A AT that we really have. It's got 100 millimeters of penetration on its standard AP round, which is enough to deal with most medium tanks, and it's even got a couple APCR rounds to deal with slightly heavier targets like, say, KV-1s or Churchills or similar tier units. You get 6 of them also in Phase A, so this is going to be your main AT gun. Now, because we have the PaK 36, I've opted to take the Panzerschrecks in Phase B, so we get 8 of them. And this is, I think, really nice because this means that we're going to have plenty of AT within towns in order to keep the enemy tanks at bay. You could take these guys in A, and I did for the longest time. However, you only get 4 of them, so they can dry up quite quickly over a match. And we don't have a lot of additional AT, so making sure we have a couple Panzerschrecks always kicking around in our towns to stop tanks from just bulldozing over us, I think is really nice. And because of the PaK 36, I think we can get away with this. And then the final card is the PaK 40. This is like the must-take because it's the only legitimate AT gun we actually have. It's got enough penetration to deal with pretty much all medium tanks in the game. It's also got APCR for the heavy tanks. Very, very strong. We get 5 of them in Phase B. You really want to take these in B so you get as many as possible because they're going to be your main tank buster in the division. Then we move on to anti-air. Not a whole lot to say. We have a card of 1 vet, 20 millimeters in Phase A, and then Flakverlings in Phase B. The Steyr 1500 is not good. Don't take it. We vet up the Gebirgsjäger Flak 38 because we could take 6 of them, but you really need to vet these guys in order for them to be effective. And if you just take them unvetted, they're just not going to be able to do anything. So vetting them up and then putting a commander near them will get them to 2 or even 3 stars of veterancy where they can actually start to affect stuff. We don't have the Flakverling vetted because we just need all 4 of them, because otherwise we'd have 6 AT pieces all made of 20 mils. So even though I'd love to vet these up, 2 of them is not worth it. We just need as many as we can. It's a very lackluster AA tab, and that's really the biggest weak point of the deck. But then we get onto artillery. Artillery is actually not that bad. So we start out with the 75mm howitzer. Now, this is a choice between this and the 81mm mortar. The primary difference is that the howitzer has unlimited range but is notably slower in firing. It's still got a decent fire rate, and it has a lot of smoke shells actually, so that can both be useful. The 81mm has arguably a little more, it's a little more effective damage wise, but it's overall got that limited range on it of 3,000 meters. So it's still an effective support weapon, but I actually kind of prefer the 75s in this deck so we can bombard almost anywhere on the map. Uh, it gives us more flexibility and allows us to save a little bit on points unless we really want to get a ton of these out. Then we also have the Battery Führers. Basic leader, you pretty much are always taking these in divisions because 4 additional leaders in Phase B that aren't taking up infantry slots, usually cheaper that way. It's just really effective. Also have a radio. And then we get the K35 105mm. I'm taking them with munitions into the munition trucks in order to have an additional 4 supply trucks, which means we'll have a ton of supply to constantly bombard our enemy with HE rounds. It's got a good rate of fire at 8 rounds per minute, which is about on par with most of the better 105mm. It's also got a couple smoke rounds, so that's useful. Biggest thing is that it's also packing a radio, so we can improve this through our various radio leaders and whatnot. It's overall an effective artillery piece, probably the best one. You could take this 105mm howitzer, but it doesn't have any smoke rounds, and I would say it's overall just a lot worse than the 105. Then we get onto the final tab, the air tab. So the air tab is the hardest one to build, in my opinion, because there's just so limited in options. So the way I've built it, I've opted for just trying to give me enough air force to last me through a game and even a little bit into Phase C, but it's tough. So the starting unit that I've taken is the C202 Fulgor. This is not a very good fighter. It's pretty fast, and its overall stats aren't bad, but the biggest problem is its armament. It's only got 2 12.7mm guns on it in order to shoot down planes, and that just doesn't do very much. If it had like a 20mm cannon on it, it'd be so much better, but because it doesn't, these planes struggle to shoot stuff down, especially if they're on the higher side in terms of resilience. And this is not helped by our AA tab being only 20mm. So we're taking these, but I'm pretty much only using them just to have some fighters in Phase A that can scare away enemy planes. I'm not expecting to actually kill a whole lot, just kind of force them away and not allow them to freely dominate the skies. In Phase A, we also have a card of the Stuka D3s, which are cluster bombs. They're effective tank busters, bit slow, vulnerable, but again, any AT is welcome, and these are good enough. They're pretty much the only thing we have to kill a heavy tank in Phase A, outside of ambushing it with AT weapons from our infantry, so they're very important just to have to make sure we can deal with something like that. Then in Phase B, we get an actual fighter with the C205 Veltro. These guys have 220 mils on them, so they're actually capable of shooting planes down. Still not the greatest thing ever, but we get 4 of them in Phase B. So we're able to actually have a modest air force supporting us here. And then we also have the final card of the Stuka JU-87G1, which has 2 3.37mm guns mounted as tank busting. Just another unit of Stuka tank busters in order to keep up this ability to deal with heavy tanks or very pesky armor that we can't deal with otherwise. In terms of anything else here, there really isn't a whole lot. I've tried out a lot of these other planes. The IK-2 could be your A-phase fighter, but it's very slow, and it's only got a single 20mm on it, so I don't like it. And then these other planes, the G50 will never shoot anything down because it's just got 2 machine guns on it. And the MS-406, it's got a 20 mil on it, and it looks like it could be the option, but it's got very bad resilience, which in practice means that essentially if there's a single 20mm gun shooting at it from the ground, it's probably dead. It dies to the faintest of breezes and is just not very efficient. I tried them and I did not like them. And then you could take the DO-17 KB1, probably in Phase B because you get 4 of them. But they got 2 500 kilogram bombs. So these could be effective if you're needing to flush out like AT guns or dealing with enemy air with enemy like for emplacements or other team weapons that are kind of sitting and blocking your ability to advance. But my biggest complaint is that our Air Force is still kind of lackluster, so these things don't have much protecting them, and I think that's their biggest knock. So I don't take them. But that is the division. Uh, Overall, I actually really enjoy this division. It's pretty fun, and I like that there is actually a fair amount of customizability. Like, you can very much change up how you take the recon tab. You could bring the Fusiliers in A. You could even load up on more infantry. You know, maybe fit in the Stoss Jaegers and the Brandenburger Pioneers and just be like the literal unstoppable god of CQC engagements. There's a fair amount of customizability here, and it's a pretty fun division. It's well rounded enough that I think it could be like not the like an actual pick in some scenarios, but you got to be really careful because this air tab and its ability to deal with air is so lackluster. But otherwise, it's not the worst division ever, and it's quite fun. But otherwise, that is all I have for you today. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and let me know down in the comments below, have you played with Unternehmen Rosselsprung? Have you enjoyed it? Are you looking forward to the upcoming Battle of Torda DLC? I believe that's how you pronounce it. Torda. I forget the name, but it's regardless the one. I'm looking forward to it for the Hungarian divisions. But otherwise, that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe to not miss out on any future content, and I will see you all later.